Hey, hello, and welcome to the 10-week screenwriting mastery program. We're going to talk a lot about screenwriting, and the main idea will be to develop your project and think about your project as we're moving on, in the story. And I let's start with the basics. My name is Ricardo Barreto. I I did not start out to become or be. Let me stop this recording for a second because there's a beep. Hello, and welcome to the 10-week screenwriting webinar program. It's great to see you here. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff during the next 10 weeks, but the main goal is really to have you think in the mind frame of a writer and help sort of think about your projects as we go through the 10 weeks. So let's first, we're going to start with the basics, and then we're going to add like different levels of complexity and go expand the story. We're going to go through some screenplays and some films and progress deep into the story of each one of them as you're thinking about your own, and then we'll get to the end, and we'll hopefully have a pretty good architecture of whatever story you wanna write, and a full grasp of the tools and the techniques and everything that's involved in this process. So first of all, let me tell a little bit about myself. I did not start out. It's not like I woke up one morning and said, hey, I want to help writers. I want to be I want to do development for other people's, stories. Of course not. It started like 5 years old when I was writing stories and telling stories and drawing stories actually, and have the family. I remember my grandparents and my mother and some friends. I would tell the story. I would explain, all the drawings I was writing in a very cinematic format. I couldn't actually write at 5 years old, but I could tell stories, that's for sure. And so they were fun, and they were entertaining things to do. And the idea of doing consulting and helping people grew out of necessity, grew out of being from Brazil, and while working in this industry and studying screenwriting, getting requests to help people out in their projects and the things they're doing. It really, let me tell you a story to tell how it really actually started. I remember I decided to launch a program. I was in Los Angeles, and I was going back to Brazil, and a friend who I helped greenlight the project, an animation project, said, the PUC University, the university's largest university in Brazil, is going to host your screenwriting program. It's going to be a weekend. It's going to be all day. You're going to be the only speaker. And I said, fine, well, let's do it. And I said, when is this? It's Saturday. I go, oh God, my flight arrives like Friday, like the day before. And I go, okay, it'll give me a day to kind of rest. And then just the days preceding, I got emails from people who like the drama department of the major network, and somebody said, she wants to be a part of it. It's like, cool. And then the producer, the director of development for also Global Films, another major powerhouse in filmmaking, and then the director of the Nucleus Animation Nada at PUC, and Cesar, the director of the biggest animation festival in South America, probably in the world. It's called Anima Mundi. It was going to be there as well, along with some of the students and interns, and the crowd was, like heavyweight all of a sudden, and they had a nice setup at the university, and I'm like, wow, that's great, awesome people. So I remember in LA, I had to catch a flight from LA to Houston, and my flight, I get to the airport because from Houston I would catch the flight to Brazil. So I get at the airport just 1 hour before my flight, 3 p.m. LAX, and they said beautiful sunlight, California weather, beautiful day, awesome. And they said no flights are leaving. I go, what do you mean no flights are leaving? It's such beautiful weather. They said no, because there's a weather situation in Houston. No planes are coming in and out of Houston. And I go, but you know what? But I have a flight, a connecting flight to Brazil. He said, don't worry, because your flight is not leaving as well. Nothing is leaving Houston right now. Nothing is flying in and out of Houston. So I thought, I had at least 2 or 3 hours of leeway room there to still get to Houston and catch my plane. So I was hoping the situation would not last more than 3 hours, which obviously it did. So, and the funny thing is, I get to Houston like 20 minutes before my flight to Brazil is supposed to leave. I rush to the terminal, to the flight to Brazil, and the plane has left. They said no plane was leaving or flying in and out of Houston, but apparently there was a window of opportunity right there that was just enough for my flight to Brazil to leave, and they had to halt all flights, put a hold on all flights before for the next hour. It was just weird. And then all of a sudden, again, no planes are leaving in and out of Houston. So I get to the airport, and it's like an emergency scenario. I found myself in the set of a film. There are long lines. There are no hotels in town. All the hotels are taken. They're setting up those military style, like bed, like camp style. Horrible. I see the lines at Continental. They're huge. And there's this woman. I remember this woman in a mink coat or something, and she was at the end of the line, and she said, "I need a hotel right now." And the guys at Continental said, "There are no hotels in town. No hotels. Everything's booked." And she says, "What do you mean everything's booked?" And they say, "It's just exactly what you hear. There are no hotel rooms anywhere in the city." And she starts pointing at each one of them and saying expletives. This is like a mid-40s woman, very classy, elegant. And all of a sudden she sounds like she's from Brooklyn, and she's really saying things I cannot say here to these people, and she walks away. It's incredible. There were priests, there were military personnel. It was a scene of a national disaster. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to miss the whole university, the whole creative, executive, TV executive people. They're going to be there at this event, and I'm not there because I'm the only speaker. So I talk to everyone I can at this time at the airport. I convince Continental. I say I have to be in Rio tomorrow. by 9 a.m. Because from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. I'm lecturing for a bunch of people. So I have to sleep in this horrible military thing that nobody can sleep in, really. And then I convinced them they switch me to a Delta flight. A Delta flight, so I'll be flying from Houston to Atlanta and from Atlanta to Rio. So I would get in to the international airport at Rio at 8, a little before 8 a.m. and I would drive immediately to the university to teach all day. So what happens is, the Delta flight happens. I almost got bumped off the flight because there's so many people trying to get in the flight. Not the flight from Atlanta to Rio, but the flight from Houston to Atlanta. And then I finally get on a flight, and the flight from Atlanta to Rio was just awesome. I said I haven't slept for over 24 hours, and I have to lecture. This is an overnight flight, and I have to lecture in the morning from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So my luck was that the flight was practically empty. I go in the middle section, there are like 4 or 5 seats empty, and I just sleep the entire flight, which was awesome. So I get to Rio about 8 a.m. I get to Rio, but my suitcases don't. So I tell Delta, they say, don't worry, and I love Delta for this. They say, don't worry, we're going to deliver it to your home. Go on, take care of your business. So I arrive at university literally about 15 minutes before the event was to start. And it's awesome. I had so much energy, I was pumped up, and I spoke non-stop with 1 hour lunch break for 7 or 8 hours about screenwriting. And then from there I got called to do some consulting jobs, to read for the film Global Films. I was also invited to do consulting for other people. But there was a subsequent event to that, and after that event, I was also I wrote the sitcom. I was invited to write a sitcom, a part of the team that wrote the first sitcom format in Brazil that was directed by Debbie Allen from LA. I produced, directed Neil Simon, which was one of my idols growing up. I learned English reading Neil Simon and Shakespeare, alternately. And I also consulted for a lot of people who have their projects in development. And the last one ended up being Buddies, which is a project that won Best Film in Brazil and Best Screenplay. So with that, and after having met so many A-list screenwriters, and I almost had a series produced at a major studio last year. Now I have 2 or 3 series that are hitting the market, and that seemingly, this goal of having series produced in the U.S. is becoming closer and closer every day, and I'm writing better and faster. So the goal here in this 10-week programs is to give you all the tools to basically to put you in the mind frame, think as a screenwriter, because it's like a lot of people think that the fact that you can write or you went to school and you can put things on paper, it means you're a screenwriter or a writer or a storyteller. And it's like trying to paint without knowing what a paintbrush is. because it's not about the writing itself. It's about using the tools, how to structure, how to understand story, and how to cause an impact. Because art is always about, at the end, about an impact. It has to resonate with the person who's reading, with the audience, at some level. I wouldn't say not everybody is, not everyone is highbrow. Most of the work we see out there is middlebrow, and of course there's some lowbrow, very reality stuff, and a lot of things that we see that really it's not our sort of scope of this program. We hope we have better aspirations for all of you. So here we go. And the journey of writing, even though I give you all the tools, and you're going to learn all the tools in this program, it's really not about knowing the tools alone, because you cannot escape who you are. It's about what are you bringing to the party? How do you see the world? How do you observe things? What level of depth of character, emotion, and understanding and system complexity of story can you understand and can you develop and you can bring, to the table? What is it that you want to say? It's a very individual process. It's who you are. Your POV, your contribution. And sometimes, like a good wine, that takes time to mature. And it takes a deep introspection to know, what exactly you want to mean. You say, I want to just have fun, I want to do a chase film, I want to do this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But, okay, fine. If you want to play that, fine. But still you have to know structure, you have to know story very well in order to make it work. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to do it with depth of character, and connection and emotion, the better, right? So, and the journey of the writer, a career as a screenwriter, we hear a lot about apparently instant successes, but instant, it's like instant sometimes takes 10 years of work and understanding, and then you become overnight success. It's an overnight success that took 10 years to produce. Just recently at the TV conference at the Writers Guild, I heard about this writer. He was traveling around the country, writing his blog, was biking around the country, but no credits. Had never had anything produced, anything. And he writes this screenplay, sends it to a manager. And from the time he sends it to a manager, it gets read, it gets sold almost immediately, and within 2 weeks, he gets recommended to Spielberg, and he's doing story notes with Steven Spielberg in that span of time. And people say, well, overnight success. But this guy has been honing his craft and thinking and studying and reading for 10 weeks or more. 10 years or more. So it's kind of not, and overnight, it is, deceptively simple. Now, and I got that screenplay immediately. I said, 2 weeks ago, last week, I got it and I read it. And it's what impresses me about that screenplay is it's elegant. Its simplicity, to the point, the character, the depth, the understanding, the confidence the writer has, and the movement forward in its simplicity, in its depth, and the structure. Everything is there so simple. So simple. and so well structured. And I think to get to that level of simplicity and elegance and depth, sometimes it takes a lot of experience and a lot of writing to chip away all that's unnecessary. So so if you're wondering, we're going to begin, of course, from the simple to the complex, and try to make the complex simple, because this is not rocket science, but there are some levels of complexity to screenwriting, and try solving the puzzle and writing your story. Okay, so first things first. One crucial piece of information. Let me show my camera here. See if I can move my camera this way or somewhere over here. Okay. Now, if I can give you guys like this one piece of information, and I'll tell you, you will say, well, this is the one thing that you will say, wow, this is worth my whatever $150 I paid here, my time, and I can go home now and be happy and say it's worth it. So if I could give you one piece of information, our goals, the number one, the supreme, like I'd say that the supreme, like the number one goal in story, the thing from which everything else sits beneath, the centralized, the super goal, is we are in the business of predicting the future. Your audience is in the business of predicting the future. So if there's one thing, that one merit of your story is to make people interested in what comes next. And that's not news. I'm not reinventing the wheel. That's something that has been studied, has been talked about. There's a book, 1920, called Aspects of a Novel, Narrative Storytelling, 1890s. There was Shakespeare. Shakespeare knew about this. You know, we're talking about 400 years ago. So you have to direct your focus, your attention towards the future. Meaning, what happens next? So all the tools we're going to talk about, all the techniques, acts, 3 acts, 4 acts, 1 act, whatever, has to have that as a supreme goal. Whatever you do that violates that is not servicing the story. Now, especially in the Western style of dramatic storytelling, the causality, storytelling, and where one thing happens because of the other, versus episodic. So you have episodic would be, if you say episodic would be one thing happens after another. Causality, one thing happens because of something else. So if you say the king died and the queen died, that's episodic. If you say the king died and the queen died of grief, that's causality. So we're going to focus on that. So this is the crucial thing, is to focus your attention forward. And how do you do that? There are several tools to do that. Okay, several tools to understand and generate that question, hope, and fear in the mind of the audience. at every single point. And that's what we're going to talk in the fractal geometry of storytelling. So the scope of the program, of course, we're going to analyze a lot of films using that, and you're going to have you experience trying to develop your own stories. In the Aristotelian sense of unity, there's another crucial piece of information, which is, and let me tell you an anecdote, so to introduce that, instead of just going straight to it. There's a Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who wrote, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Deja Vu, a lot of other films they helped write and produce. They grossed over $7 billion by now. He had something called the hallway test, and the hallway test, they say, will define your career, will make or break your career. The hallway test is sort of like this. Suppose you have a secretary reading your script in the hallways of Paramount. The door is ajar. She's like juggling schedules, she's answering phone calls, she's trying to, answer other people in the office, trying to, take care of her boss's itinerary that day and all that stuff. But the important thing is that she's reading your screenplay. And down the hallway, walking this way, is a producer who became famous, finally got a career after his previous film was successful, and a director. You can imagine this guy, like with spectacles and stuff, and shaggy hair, and he's like the brilliant director, very creatively, visually, which means actually that he doesn't understand story, but he's visually creative. Then they're walking past the door, and the producer is looking for another script, of course, and the secretary, also called assistant or just reader, is on page, let's say page 42 of your screenplay. And he asks, he picks in and says, "Oh, you're reading a screenplay. What's it about? What's the story about?" That secretary is going to say in one or two sentences what your story is about. If these guys like it, if she says something like, this is a story about doctors who die and who on purpose to bring their bodies back to life, or they say this is a story of a soldier, a family who loses everyone at the Second World War. They lose every brother dies except for one. His name is Ryan, and it's a sergeant who has a mission. It's a mission to go and rescue the last surviving Ryan. And if the producer, the director, like the story, whatever the secretary says, they will say, "Here, listen. Let me read that screenplay. Is there anybody attached to produce it?" Or they'll say, the director says, "Anyone attached to direct? Who's in it?" The worst thing you want to hear is a secretary that says, "I have no idea." It sounds like a thriller, but actually has some comedy moments, and we don't know. If people don't know what your screenplay is about within the first 25 pages, you're dead in the water. And a lot of people waste time writing about things, concepts that are weak or have no space in the marketplace. In Saving the Cat, he often talks about doing a test trial, like going to your friends or going to perfect strangers at a bar and saying, I'm writing a film about this. This is the film. What do you think? Or even say, I saw a film. Think of your film as if it had already been produced, it's already on the screen right there. That's how you describe the film. And think, well, this is a film about this and about this and about this. What do you think? If everybody says, you know the old story, like if one person says you're a horse, he's crazy. If 2 people or 3 people say you're a horse, it's a conspiracy. If everybody says you're a horse, time to buy a saddle. Now, if everybody says your idea is horrible or they don't understand, you shouldn't waste your time. Focus your time on writing that script. So think about the concept and what your story is about. So I have people, when people send screenplays for me to read, I always request. It's a very interesting thing that started with the Scriptwriters Network. They do this, and it's great. They say, write a paragraph or 2 or 3 sentences describing what your story is about on the front page. Because that way, I have a guiding light instead of trying to figure out in the dark what this story is about, what this person intended. Because what the person intended and what's on the page is often completely different. The person is not able to fulfill the vision of those 2 or 3 sentences. Or maybe the story has a much better story than the way that person describes it in the 3 paragraphs. There's a character that should be the leading character, should be the story, or there's a story that the person is not seeing. In the third eye, the eye of a consultant, someone from the outside, he'll be able to see it and actually focus and fix it and help that writer achieve his vision. My profile as a consultant has been, I'll tell you from my perspective and my story, for reading hundreds of screenplays, hundreds. Some are incredibly, almost hopeless, and some have hope. The point is, I have never read a screenplay and said, yes, ready to go, brilliant, awesome, 0, never. However, my profile has always been to find the gem, the diamond, the something, and all of them were salvageable. All of them could become great stories. And this is why I believe so much in development, in the execution. Because stories, I think, like stories, okay, a dime a dozen, but to execute the story is really key for me, from my experience. And ideas and concepts, don't get me wrong, it's very important. And a lot of films got sold on the concept alone, especially when you're talking about high concept comedies, but I think execution is key. So I always look at something. There have been 2 or 3 or 4 that I see and I look, there's nowhere to go with this. The person is usually trying to be derivative, referencing other movies. There's no sincerity in the writing. The person's trying to look at, it seems like the whole person's life experience is about watching other movies and trying to copy any stuff. You see that the person's trying to do it for money. It's a hack, and this is, some things are really, but that's a minor percentage of everything I read. And I'm very thorough and always very helpful. I've met people who have never written a thing in their lives, and they gave me tremendous material to help them develop a story, even though they can't write. But I say, if you take this path and you write this sequence, we will make the story happen. Still, there are 2 or 3 that I can think right now that will be absolutely gorgeous, amazing films. And I keep these writers in the Rolodex in case we have the time to develop this further in the future. So there are really two kinds of films. Two, but let's simplify. Chase and escape. So either someone is trying to get something and they're having a hard time getting it, or someone is trying to escape from something and they're having a hard time doing so. You remember the Fugitive with Harrison Ford, like the quintessential example of the escape kind of film and chase kind of film. And from there you have the second most important information you have in a screenplay. So when people ask about your scripts, they usually refer to the main dramatic question. What is the dramatic question of your film? Right? So let's start here. What is the main dramatic question of the film? Now, the dramatic question is something that you will pose, to the audience, and the question that will have a resolution at some point, and we'll explain where that point is, because most people think it's at the end, and it's not at the end. So the dramatic question is the main controlling idea of your film. If you ask a question, will they get married? Will they end up together? And then you have the answer, yes or no, and you have people living in hope and fear, throughout the film, trying to predict the future. Remember, our goal is to predict the future. This is what we do. Not an easy task. Your audience is there sitting in the dark. They're trying to predict the future. Okay? They have 30 seconds to predict the future, sometimes less. And if they come up with a solution better than yours, you had 6 months to write your screenplay, sometimes more, you have failed as a screenwriter. If an audience in 10 seconds can come up with a better idea, a better solution, a better dialogue, a better scene, a better future than you had 6 months, you have failed. So keep that in mind. So we have here the dramatic question of the film, the main element that will hold the structure, and the dramatic question is directly related to the idea of acts. Remember, people say, oh, a film is a 3-act structure, it's a 4-act structure. Remember, we have number 1, we'll focus on the future. Direct people's attention forward. What's next? Then we have the main dramatic question. The film is about, are they going to save, are they going to be able to rescue Private Ryan or not? Right? So we have the origin of a 3-act structure, which is directly related to the idea of the main dramatic question. Why? Let's say why. Why? Because a question, by necessity, has 3 parts, right? Posing of the question. You're going to ask what the question is. You're going to pose it to the public right at the beginning. Then you're going to deliberate upon the answer. And then C, you're going to answer. So you have, in that structure, sort of reiterates itself in the sequential approach of films. Okay, so basically what we're going to develop here is a sequential approach as developed by the work of at USC and the graduate program at USC. One of the most brilliant structures, because the 3-act structure in the sequential approach, they marry two traditions. From film, we had the reels. Each reel would have 12-15 minutes, and you have a dangling cause for the next reel, which would be the following week. Comes from the serials. You have a reel each week, and then the reel sequence changed when the reels were shown on the same day in a sequence, but that structure of the sequence remained, with the 3-act structure that was borrowed from the playwriting tradition in New York and the writers that came to Hollywood. So it was a perfect marriage of sorts. So if we're in the business of predicting the future, we will kind of play with the fear and the hope of the audience in that regard, setting up the structure. So let's see if we have space here, or if I'll continue on. Okay, let's see here. Okay. So the 3-act structures. Let me just erase this. I'm going to erase this. The sequence approach. Basically, let's suppose we have $120 minutes of film. Let's divide this 180 minutes into 8. We're going to divide this into 8 hypothetical. Okay, let me just move my camera. Oh, sorry. See if I can move my camera over here. Okay, here we go. So let me close this. Yes. Oh, hold on. Yes. Jesus. I'm having a hard time here. So, okay, here we go. Finally. Now, okay, so assume you have a film, 120 minutes, divided in 8 sequences. You have a midpoint here. You have sequences A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Okay? Okay, here we go. So assume that roughly, this is for laboratory purposes, to ideal conditions, every sequence would have 15 minutes, which roughly also, for lab conditions, it would be 1 page per minute. 1 page per minute. Okay, so you have 120 pages for a 120-minute film. Even though the number more accept nowadays is 100 pages. 105 can be 95. Between 95 and 105 is a number that's mostly seen in good light nowadays for a feature film. So each sequence, let me get the tools. Each of these sequences will have its own internal structure, its own dramatic question that it controls that sequence. So this sequence would have its own dramatic question, this sequence would have its dramatic question, and so forth. And within each of these sequences, you would have dramatic questions for every scene. Every scene will have its dramatic question. And as you can imagine, within every scene, every moment would have its own dramatic questions. You know, if you really want to go down to the atomic level, you can even explore deeper levels of complexity. And why is that? Why is that? The reason is because when we are when we are writing a screenplay, you know, it's a contrivance. We are creating something that does not exist. So in order to hide to the public that this is a contrivance, in order to make it organic, we have to explore all the possibilities and leave open the other possibility, leave all the doors open, listen to the story. The more and more I write, the more I feel that the story is something that comes to me in a way that I allow it to breathe and have a life of its own. And I allow the story to happen. I don't force it in a certain way, in a certain direction. I know where I want to get, but I let it breathe. I let it inform. It's like Neil Simon said, you know, how do you know if a joke is funny? He said, when I hear it. You know, to be able to hear your characters, to hear your story. You know, that's the greatest thing, to be in that state of relaxation and allowing the story to happen to you as you're writing. Being able to change. I mean, you can have a plan, but allow that plan to change. What I think a lot of writers fail, and what I see, is that they're writing a story about this, and it's only about this, and it's obvious that this is going to happen. I don't see the different directions it can take as real possibilities with the same level of probability, if not more. What I usually say to writers is, if you're going to write about the story of two people getting married, they're destined to be together, write as if that possibility will never exist. As if that event, the answer is not going to be in the positive, it's going to be in the negative. So write with a set of possibilities where you have 90% chance that it's not going to happen, and convince the audience that it's not going to happen. And maybe it happens, and it's a surprise. Because that way, you always have the other possibility opening. Even the simple act of going and getting in the car to go somewhere, you can sabotage. The screenwriter is in the, in the business of sabotaging people's ambitious goals. So he can get a phone call. There can be a robbery. A tire can be flat. anything can happen to sabotage the guy going to get the car. And so in the first initial two sequences, what is very important, so by here, when you get to the sequence B, your dramatic question is established right here. We know without a shred of a doubt what the story is about. This is about a father who's a former FBI, CIA, whatever, or Navy SEAL who has to go and rescue his daughter, that she was kidnapped by some bad guys while traveling in Europe or something. So we know that that's the dramatic question. Will he save her or not? That's the main question, right? So one thing to know, and very important, the first two sequences, a very important concept I want you to know, is called in media res. That means, what is the life of the characters, and what would their lives be? What is the way, the direction their lives are going, were it not for this event that happens and knocks them off course, and they will spend the entire film trying to get back to the course, to the way things were before. But maybe they can't go back to the way things were before because they have an emotional problem to solve. They have something to solve. Maybe they are going to a better state. Maybe they can change. They are incapable of change. And when you're incapable of change, usually the end's tragedy. It's a negative. And usually you saw Leaving Las Vegas with, what's his name? Coppola's nephew, the actor. He Leaving Las Vegas. He was an alcoholic. He didn't change. Therefore, he died. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson couldn't overcome his basic human nature, so the door was open for freedom, his path, but he had to stay. No, he had to. We can see that in examples in real life as well. So we have in media res is what would their lives be? We have to get that strong sense. You know, when Cary Grant calls his mother, "I'll see you tomorrow," or "do something," and then he goes to a hotel and he is kidnapped. He is mistaken by another agent or somebody who's by accident. And all the plans that he telegraphed, that we as an audience know he was going to do, are sabotaged or destroyed by this new event that came in and kicked in his life. And he's going to start to piece together the puzzle to go back to the way things were before. You know, sometimes it's a necessity, it's a need that a character has inside that not even the character knows. Because so in media res is an important concept when setting up your story. You know, so we're going to look at that in several films, and we're going to look at this is basic structural stuff. Okay, basic structural stuff. We're going to look at examples in details throughout the following weeks. So again, this problem of playing the story, with only, like for example, only one aspect, like you say only one possibility. Say they're going to get married. Oh, it's obvious that they're going to get married. I'm just playing with the audience. The audience knows, oh, this is so boring and predictable. They're going to get married. And I know they're going to get married. But if you make it really hard and impossible and play with expectations and leave the other doors open, that this is not going to happen, then the story gains a lot of strength because it gains reality. It gains a sense of no one can see my screen. What happened here? Sorry guys. I don't know how long this screen has been off, but I was talking about the concept of in media res, the lives of their characters, of the characters, in your story. They get knocked off course by a specific event, and they spend the rest of the film trying to get back on track, maybe to a different position way up there. It has all to do with predicting the future. The hotel, case Cary Grant, he calls his mother, says, I'll meet you tomorrow, or I'll meet you after tonight, or something. And then the plans he gets knocked off because when he's kidnapped by a group of, international gangsters, whatever, because they confuse him for another agent. And he spends the rest of the film trying to piece back the puzzle and understand what happened and clear his name. When people don't change, we end in tragedy. We have Leaving Las Vegas. He's incapable of change. Also, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. He's incapable of changing his humanity. So we're in the business of predicting the future, as we know, of generating interest in the future. We generate interest in the future when we raise questions. All these questions that we see here. And the questions are playing with the audience mind and the audience expectations about what's going to happen in the future. So we have the main dramatic question, and then we play with hope and fear. We're always creating hope that something's going to happen, or fear that something's going to happen, and we're answering this always in the positive or in the negative. We can create hope that something good is going to happen, and something good actually happens. We can create hope that something good is going to happen, something bad actually happens. We create fear that something horrible is going to happen, something horrible happens. We create fear that something's going to happen, something horrible is going to happen, and something good actually happens. Actually, the bad guy is not the bad guy, he's actually the good guy. And he's here to help. We thought he was going to kill me. But that kind of playing with expectations is always leave it open for anything, because if you look at your story as a system, let's say we look at the story as a system, that we're creating hope and fear, you understand that predicting the future, it should be made hard. You shouldn't make predicting the future hard for your audience, because it's not only about what is going to happen. Okay, it's about when, how, why, by who, so it's a lot of questions that are manipulated for the experience, the impact that you're going to have in your audience. Now, to predicting the future, hold with me for a second while I'll talk about I go into the theory a little bit, some things just for a thought about how difficult it is to predict the future. Before we go back into the more practical stuff, just give me these 7 minutes to talk about this stuff, because we have something called the observer effect, because that's very intrinsically connected to who you are and what you want to tell the stories, how the way you see the world, the way you perceive the world, because the way you perceive the world, the problems that you see, sometimes they are created by the observer, created by yourself. I remember having a discussion with a friend last night about a community that we were part together, and a community that I respect. I don't, you can't agree with 100% with everything, but you see a very positive impact of the community and in the world. And then he says, this is the way I perceive it. This community is negative because of this and this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like shocked a little bit, but I'm saying, oh my God, he's really confused in the way that he thinks about these issues. It's coming from his own perspective that only he can create it. In the evidence, nothing has ever been said by anybody in the community, of any leader in the community, quite the contrary, that supports any of the views that he presented, created in his own self about the community. So sometimes we can look at the same thing and look different. We can look at a country and look different. We can look at a person and look different. Just the act. If I tell somebody, if I ask someone what they think of you, it will change the way they think of you. Now, this is one of the observer effect. It makes it also difficult to predict the future. And what people think of your character, what people are thinking, right now what you make them think, it will, but even if you let's say, go past this barrier of the observer effect, there's something called the Heisenberg principle, which says that in a system, like in a story, in order to predict the exact outcome of the story, I'm translating it into a story, but it's really concepts of physics, but you have to know exactly the exact positions and momentums of all the components of the system. By all the components of the systems, I mean all the characters, everything that's moving in the story, that's not moving, externalities, things that are coming from. So you'd have to know everything in order to predict the future. Otherwise, it is also known as the uncertainty principle. Don't always assume that things are going to go a certain way because you want it to be, because then we'll see the hand of the writer. I had an experience of this sort of when you're driving a car, you're driving home. I was driving home this actually Saturday, and after a long day, I said, finally I'm getting home. And the light goes green, everybody starts moving. And it takes me 1 second to get rid of my cell phone. It was on the passenger side. I just wanted to put it in the center, in the slot. I just looked the slot to place it in the center of the car, the console, because I didn't want it to break and the thing to fly off. That 1 second, the light was green, everybody started moving. 1 second, everybody decides to stop on my lane. Somebody decides to stop. Every car just brakes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I go like this, right behind the Mercedes, and I just pull to the side. Luckily, there was no one parked. I brake hard, and I almost didn't make it home. I left 2 blocks away from my home. And I'm thinking about, wow, this is the Heisenberg principle. I don't know everything. It's uncertainty. I don't know how. I assume I'm getting home safe. That's my dramatic question. Will he get home or not? And then something happens that throws off the entire balance of the entire system that I don't even know. And also, even if you take into account everything that's on the system and everything that can affect the system called your story, you still have something called quantum tunneling. Let me see if I can write it down here. Okay, quantum tunneling. So, which implies that everything, I look at someone, I look at everything, I look at an object. It seems that it's stationary, that it's stopped. But it has fluctuations. Every matter is fluctuating. And we can't see it, we can't perceive it, but it's fluctuating. There's a probability that it's here, that it's here, that it's here, that it's here. And the more we know the exact position, the less we know the momentum. The more we know the momentum, the less we know the exact position. And so the fluctuations that happens at every individual level, object level. Also there's the butterfly effect, that a little tiny imperceptible event, like a butterfly flapping its wing across the world, can affect and create a cascade of events that will create a hurricane in Florida or something, that will increase the strength of a hurricane or something. And of course, even if you understand butterfly effects, if you understand everything in the system, if you understand if you can calculate exact movements of everything, if you can account for butterfly effects and things there, you still have external perturbations, sort of things that happens in the outskirts, the outside of your story, that may influence, the result and the effect of your story and the prediction of the future of your story and where your characters are going. This will explore this further when we explore the concept of out of frame picture. This is a film outside of the film. What you leave outside of your film sometimes is more important, if not as important, if not more important, than what's in the film. What you edited to be in a specific script or film. So basically, okay, let's go back to practical matters here. Basically, you're thinking about writing a story where let me see the time here first, because we have time. Let me extend the time maybe. Control. So, okay, basically, if I get a warning, I'll just try to get more time going on here. So basically, you want to write a story that you know what the story is about. And I'm going to assign some homework after this. You want to say, this is the dramatic question of my story. This is my story is about. You want people to say, the story is about a little girl who wants to win a contest across a contest, beauty, some sort of beauty pageant, and she's the least likely to win, and she convinces the entire family to go with her on a trip, across the country to go to this beauty pageant and get there just before the deadline. And it's about their journey. Will she make it? Won't she make it? And you see all the crap that happens to make it not possible. We're playing on the negative answer of the question. Now, so you want to write a story where we know what the story is about by page 25, the latest, that we engage with your characters, that we create empathy, we create emotions with your character, that we take people by the hand, lead your audience by the hand, and say, let's come on this journey with me. Because the first 5 minutes, especially if you're unknown, the first 5 minutes, the people are figuring out who you are. They aren't sitting in the dark, they're figuring out, well, do I like this guy? Do I really want to watch this entire film, or is it, your first job as a writer is to make people comfortable and have them say, wow, I really want to watch this movie. I like this guy, I like the style, I like the rhythm, I like what he has to say, I like the level of the dialogue. This is me, this is what I want to be, this is where I'm at the right place, I can relax now. Which is different when you go to see a Spielberg movie or a Scorsese movie, or whomever, that already beforehand, say it's a Spielberg movie. Oh, okay, I can relax and just watch the movie. I kind of know what to expect, but when you're new, when you're relatively unknown, we have to set up expectations and the promise of the film. And no matter how interesting the trailer is, the promises that brought people to the theater, at the beginning they're testing out. It's like a blind date. They're like, oh, okay, let's see the first few minutes if I really trust this guy, if he's really worth my time here too, so I can spend the next 2 hours not being incredibly upset, but actually enjoying the journey, because his life, his story, as he presents on the screen, is much better than my life. The moment my life becomes more interesting than your story, is like, oh, wait a second, it's a problem. So so you're creating a story, you are focusing on, you're raising a dramatic question for your story. You're very conscious of what predicting the future means for you and the audience, what the audience wants. They will be trying to predict the future as well as you. Should make them, fail at predicting the future, maybe, and surprising them, of course. You have the main dramatic question. You're going to raise, in the 3-act structure, basically you will pose the question, here you will deliberate upon the question, here you'll answer or restructure, and we'll go into detail for the 3rd act. Here we're going to look at several examples where this happens. And this is how we call Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. You can have Act 4, Act 5, you can divide it in 4 or 5 sequences. You can do whatever you want. There's no set rules. But you have to understand the rules, the basic, before you can break them. And you have to understand that this is the main principle of storytelling. Focus on the future, on what's next. So we have the dramatic question at the level of each sequence. We have the dramatic question at the level of each scene. We have each dialogue, each moment, and even the act of passing a salt shaker can be a question. It's like, will he get the salt shaker or not? A waitress, it's like a day player. She's just in this one scene in the film, and the actor says, "Can I have the salt, please?" If you play the obvious answer, you just skip the salt. If you want to play with the fluctuations and all that stuff, quantum tunneling and Heisenberg and all that stuff, you will say, maybe not, or maybe every salt shaker is being used, so maybe the waitress doesn't like him. It reminds him of his previous boyfriend or something, and she's really testy that day. She's in a bad mood. So these are all external, perturbations, events, and things, butterfly effects and little things that will change the outcome of that specific moment in the scene. So here we go, and then you want a character, and you want the question to be very clear. And you want to get a sense of what the life of these people would be were it not for the event that comes in and disturbs their lives, that their lives should be. You want to raise hope and fear throughout the film, and you're going to see a story as a system where everything interacts and everything influences everything else. Okay, and be open. Leave every door open to whatever can happen and may happen in your story. Let your characters speak. Be surprised by a line of dialogue. Keep open. So we're going to begin exploring story next week, but I want you to do a little homework here. Let's see if I can clear the screen. Apparently not. Let me see if I can... Oh, this is going to take forever. Okay. I should get more practice with this stuff next time. So I'm just gonna assign some homework, things that we can talk about next week. Number one is, of course, if you're writing your own story, Here we go. So if please, okay. If you're writing your own story, homework. 1. What's the main dramatic question of your story? What's your story about? Let's say we met at the elevator. I'm going to be in the elevator with you for 30 seconds. Can you tell me in 30 seconds what your story is about as we're riding up the elevator? That will be the main dramatic question from that point of view. We're not talking about theme yet. Theme, we're going to get to theme later. That's deep. That's what the theme is. Usually the difference between what the character wants and what the character actually needs. So that's the theme, is a universal truth upon which it rules the whole system of your storyline. Now, number 2, homework. We have to you're going to watch Toy Story. You're going to watch Casino Royale. You're going to watch Gattaca. Good movie. And you're going to watch North by Northwest. Hitchcock. So, Toy Story. What's the main dramatic question? Gattaca. What's the main dramatic question? North by Northwest. What's the main dramatic question? See if you can identify the 3-act structure. Okay, in each of these films. See if you can identify the 3-act structure in each of these films. For Casino Royale, I want you to identify act structure. How many acts are there in Casino Royale? And see if you can figure out what's the main dramatic question for each act. What happens? What's the main dramatic question for each act? Okay, so we're not at this point yet, but we're going to do this later. We're going to watch a film or a TV series or a pilot, whatever you want to do. We're going to watch it, and you're going to learn how to write every scene as you watch. Write a scene, pause, write. What happened in this scene? Next scene, pause, write. What happened in the scene, or type. And then after that, you will try to remove a scene from the film and to see if that works. Then you understand structure, because you'll see, wow, if I change this, if I remove the scene, then the other scene here in the future will not make sense, and then this is not going to happen. So you understand why the scenes are so well structured, so well needed in film. A film that's well structured, you cannot remove anything from it. Everything advances the story forward. Everything moves it a notch towards the future. We're moving towards the future. We're trying to answer a question. We're setting up a question, or we're trying to answer a question. We're bringing a lot of stuff. And when next week comes, we're going to talk about all the tools. Telegraph, main dramatic question, ironic tension, dangling causes, interaction scenes, aftermath scenes, motifs, and a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to really open the toolbox next week, and we're going to learn, we're going to work and learn how to write a screenplay by watching how the others did it, how the masters in some of the films that worked so well did it, one by one. We're going to piece them out, and we're going to make what seems complex, turn it into simple ideas that you can execute. So it was cool having you here. We will talk more next week. All right, take care.